God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call. Councilmember Olson is absent. Otherwise, all remaining council is present. We had an agenda that was presented. Is there any additions or changes to the agenda? No. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Dave. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Keith. Call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. We had our minutes from our June 19th meeting. Is there any corrections or changes needed to the minutes as presented? I didn't see any, so nobody's seeing any. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Warren. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dave. I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. At this time is our public open forum. Is there anybody here who wishes to address the council? Anybody?
Gunther Austin, 326, 231 Maple, got the wrong address. We have a problem down at the church, Episcopal Church. Our sewer was backing up. We got that fixed to a point. We found out then the street is bad. Then our water pipe had to be replaced. We found out the street has a leaking water. You have one big problem on Main Street, and it's going to get nothing but worse. And I know that MnDOT won't touch it for whenever they made that the historical Main Street, 30 years or better. You've got to get on the ball and get that thing fixed. They're working right now trying to get that water leak stopped.
Okay. I seen the construction going on out there today.
It's been one mad harassment type thing. It's just,
Okay.
that street is in bad shape.
We are, we have been, just for, I think for the council's information and for staff, I know we've been talking about Highway 71 for some time, and we're very much aware of the infrastructure that lays under that street that needs some work. But I think with what's happening there at the church, and as Gunther noted, that just solidifies a lot of our already knowing in our discussions how bad that infrastructure is under there, that we definitely need to figure out a way to address it. I think
Just so soft and ready to go.
Yep. And I know there's been discussions at the PUC in regards
Well,
to
the
that.
PUC's been talking about it for 20 years.
Yep. So, thank you, Gunther. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council? Anybody else wish to address the council? Third and final time? Anybody else wish to address the council? All right, we'll move on. We'll close it. Public hearings, we have none. We'll move on to reports and presentations. Brian, Police Department monthly report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Activity report for June 2013. Some of the numbers we had 9 alarm calls. We had 40 assists for other agencies. We had 13 dog complaints. 11 driving after revocation and suspended license. 12 driving, did I say dog complaints before? Or we had 13 dog complaints and 12 driving complaints. Yeah. 4 small amount of marijuana arrest, 7 juvenile problems, 14 medicals, 9 driving without a valid license, 8 damage to properties, 9 accidents, 19 suspicious calls, 11 thefts. You see our verbal warnings were at 346, and our total ICRs were at 389 for a total activity of 735. And we also in June worked 4 hours of the TZD, or Safe and Sober, as you know it. So we had quite a few hours there. So the next one there, you compare it to May, up slightly from May, which is normal as the summer goes here. And from 2012, it looks like we're up a little bit too. So a lot more calls the way it looks, so. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Any questions for Brian? Dave? No? All right. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
Move on into the ambulance department quarterly report. Kathy?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here to give the second quarter report for the ambulance for 2013. In April, we had 11 no loads or canceled calls, and May we had 8. June we had 6 no loads and canceled calls. Those consisted of transfer, 1 canceled transfer, fight assaults, we had several of those. 5 patients we did not transport from crashes, fall, seizure, and unconscious fainting patient, slumper, 4 medical alarms. We had 1 fire standby, 1 drill we participated in St. Cloud, the big rig show. 1 was out of our primary service area, another fight, and then a taser. So that's what constituted our no loads and cancel calls for the second quarter. For our advanced life support transfers, we did 11 in the month of April, and that's a transfer where we take a nurse along from the hospital. In May, we had 6 of those, and June, we had 4 advanced life support transfers from our facility here in Sauk Center to another medical facility. Basic life support transfers, in April, we had 11. May 11, and June we had 5. So for the second quarter, we had 48 total transfers where we took patients from our hospital in Sauk Center to a different facility, a facility with higher care, or where the family wanted to go to a different facility or specialized treatment of some type. So you can see from that, that's where we rack up most of our miles on the ambulance, so that's why we come back every 3 years wanting to rotate a rig out and get a new rig, because we do put on a lot of miles with all of our transfers. Scene transports in April, we had 26, 27 in May, and June 24. So you can see our total calls for April were 59, which is up from last year where we had 42 in the same time period. May, we had a total of 52 calls, and that's up from last year where we had 46 in the second quarter. In June, we actually had a pretty slow month. We had 39 calls, and that's down from 61 that we had last year in June. So, and then you can see we billed of the 59, we billed out were 48, billed 44 in May, and billed out 33 in June. And our total that we've billed out for the year, including January, February, March, and the second quarter, is just over $258,000 that we've billed out. Any questions for me?
Okay. Any questions for Kathy?
I know you're racking up miles. Do you have a forecast or an expectation of when you're going to be needing to replace an ambulance again?
Probably next year we'll be asking.
Okay.
So I'm assuming during your budget cycle, you'll be looking at that for
Yes.
capital expenditure.
Right.
Any other questions? So there's the message over the bow, next year ambulance. is
Right,
what you're
there you
saying. All right.
I will
Just
ask
saying.
one other thing, because I understand you're prepared for it. Mike Olson isn't here to ask for it, but I understand you have some goals that you kind of wrote out. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well,
I do.
let's put them on the record then.
Okay. I had them last time as well. I guess our goals, number one, is to continue to rotate our ambulances through so we have working ambulances. I have worked for the ambulance for over 25 years, and I was here many, many years ago when we had ambulances that broke down along the roadway, and I know that can happen even with a brand new vehicle, but years ago we had some older vehicles, and it wasn't uncommon to break down and have to call a tow truck or another service to transport our patient. And I don't want to see that again for Sauk Center and the community. So number one is to keep our ambulances rotated through on a regular basis, so we have working ambulances. And then just to continue to exhibit a positive force in the community. You know, the ambulance always has a bad reputation, and we're trying very hard to overcome that. And I think we've done a good job at that. So we want to continue to provide that pre-hospital care, and in order to do that, we need to have the training that's provided to us, and we need to continue our monthly trainings and get any outside training we can get to keep our EMTs at the highest level we can keep them. And then a bigger garage, I don't necessarily say a new garage, but a bigger garage, because we do have 20 or 19 EMTs right now. When we get together for our monthly meetings, it's crowded and cramped in there, and we don't have a good training facility area. So not necessarily a new garage, but a bigger facility that's good for our needs.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions?
Nope.
Thanks, Kathy.
Great, thank you.
All right, moving on to the Planning Commission report, Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In your packet, you have a copy of the Planning Commission agenda from July 9th. We had 3 public hearings, which you will be addressing in the action items later this evening, and the May and June monthly building reports. And we had 1 administrative appeal, and that will be coming the July 30th as a public hearing. That was added onto the agenda under 6D.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions? No, and we have 3 action items this evening in regards to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so. Hearing none, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Move on to the EDA report, Vicki.
Just moving right along tonight. The EDA met in regular session on July 10th. The main topics on the agenda was review and approval of the tax increment financing pay-as-you-go semi-annual payments, along with the approval of the semi-annual abatement contract payments, and these are addressed later on in the agenda. The other items that reviewed was just kind of ongoing various economic development projects that we're working on. They had no action items on those at the meeting. It was just more of discussion based. So our action will be taken under agenda item 7A and B on the tax increment and abatement payments.
Very good. Any questions? All right, thank you. Moving on, Airport Commission report.
The airport board met on their regular session on Wednesday, July 10th. The main topic of discussion was logistics of the airport fly-in breakfast, which was held on July 14th, which was last Sunday. We served just over 300 people, served breakfast in the hangar, and then also we're able to give about 85 rides. We did, with the weather, there's about 6 people that didn't get rides, but we got their names and we'll be giving them a ride on a sunny day. So that's something that we still have coming up. We got a lot of good ideas for next year's fly-in, and we did have some limitations this year. Budget cuts at the federal level didn't allow us to do and the state level actually didn't allow us to do some of the military type machines that we're going to have out there, and they're looking at air balloon and medevac and different things like that, more things for people to see at the airport next year. So, but this was a good experience for us because they haven't had one out there in 14 years, so it's been a while.
Very good. I can say I was out there and was very pleasantly surprised to see all of the people, whether they were there for breakfast or for rides, or, I mean, there was people all over. So I think it was a great success and very well attended. So I thought it was.
And there was airplanes landing and taking off, and they were coming in one after the other and turning around and taking off. So it was really interesting to see that choreograph going on, just with the pilots speaking to each other. Of course, we don't have an air traffic controller at Sauk Center, but it worked out very well.
Thank you, Vicki. Any questions in regards to the airport report? All right. We'll move on to the Park Board report.
The Park Board met on Tuesday, June 4th in their regular session, and they had, I take that back, that was July 9th. They met regarding mostly about the Splash Pad Committee presentation and about the multipurpose park master plan. So they kind of did a little bit of a dry run and discussion so that the Park Board could give some feedback to them. The open meeting with the public is planned to be at the Park Board meeting in August. So the first Tuesday of August, we're scheduling to receive at the park board level, the presentation, and also that'll be a public meeting for the entire public to come and see what the plan is for the multipurpose park master plan, and then it will kind of hone in a little bit more on the splash pad part of it, which would be phase 1. So that'll be an opportunity for people to come and get their questions answered and to learn about that. And the city council, of course, will be invited to that presentation as well. And then that will come to the city council the next night, then on a regular session. So that was our main project out there. The campground internet is up and running. We took some time to get that going. We ended up switching carriers because our wireless carrier no longer could provide service in Sauk Center. And so that is going, and now we need to start working on getting it expanded within the campground. We have our hotspot like we used to have, and now we'll get it extended. And then they talked about a 2013 project. According to the capital improvement plan, it was going to be like a restroom at Browns Park or Morning Brew Park, something like that. They decided not to do that at this time because they're looking at perhaps those dollars can be utilized elsewhere. They didn't know if the multipurpose park went, if they wanted maybe to get the irrigation done there instead or do something like that. So they did not, they don't have a recommendation on that yet. Now, if they're not going to have a recommendation in August, I'm pretty sure we probably won't have a 2013 project because it takes a while to put those together, but we don't have a recommendation at this time. So, does anybody have questions on the park board?
Any questions? I think you elaborated on it a little bit, but obviously with the campground and the capital project for 2013, I mean, obviously if we're going to do it in the fall, it ain't going to benefit till really next year in a sense, and depending upon what we do. But when we set up the 5-year plan, I mean, I know those were kind of projections of what we thought we were going to do, and it was slated to do some type of facility at those parks, as you mentioned, potentially Browns Park or Morning View Park. So obviously there must be discussions amongst the park board, which is great, but maybe the community in a whole as well, stating the need there. I'm surprised that a restroom maybe would be pulled back from doing versus maybe doing a sprinkler system or something. It seems to me that I'm surprised.
Part of the discussion had to do with, do we put the money where more people will be, or we put the money in more of a neighborhood park? And we've kind of had the history of kind of spreading it around, kind of doing a little bit every year, a different park gets something done. And Browns Park, we've done quite a bit of work there with the trees and the sprinkler and the playground, and really the restroom is really the only thing that's missing now. And so it was like, okay, should we wrap that up? And then they kind of talked about that, and they said, but then again, they've got these other parks, so they were kind of waffling on that a little bit. So at which time, and we did not have the full park board at the meeting, and so they felt it was better to wait.
Very good, thank you.
Have we lost any more trees at Browns Park, or are they all pretty well established now? Or?
We had lost a couple of them, of those original ones that we planted, and we've done, but most of them are doing really good, and they're growing very well.
Wasn't there a class that did that?
We had actually our forester, Bill Berg, kind of spearheaded it, but they did the Build a Forest campaign where he solicited donations, and then they planted trees, one for every first grader, was it Dave? Yes. One for every first grader. And so those trees will be quite huge when they graduate. So our plan is when that class graduates to again have pictures out there with them.
And that was the class of, you guys are talking over there, huh? 2019? 18. Okay.
Not that far away.
No?
No, not that far away.
That can't be right.
All right. Any other questions in regards to the park board report? Thank you, Vicki. That was a very good report. Hearing none, we'll move on to the operations committee report.
The operations committee met on Wednesday, June 26th, and they really focused on about 2 topics: stormwater repairs and concrete work. And I do have a list for you of all the different stormwater repairs that they're juggling right now, and then also concrete work for mostly curb and that type of thing. And I'll just let you know the ones that we're out actually getting quotes on right now. And that would be under the concrete work, item A, which is the alley entrance at 717 Country Club Lane. There's an alley that is all chewed up there. We have some gutter and curbing at 133 Hickman. We have a concrete spillway at 420 Walnut, a concrete spillway at the intersection of 2nd Street South and Birch Street South, curb damage at 511 Country Oak Drive, concrete spillways at the Lilac and State Street intersections, and a concrete radius at Center Street and 12th Street by the substation. So those ones we're getting the quotes for right now from the contractors, and then once we look at the numbers, we may be able to do them all, we may have to narrow it down, it just depends on where the numbers come in at.
Okay. Any questions?
The curb peeling, that's where it was, actually, there was a curb there for a driveway, and then someone just put a curb on top of concrete, so it's breaking off, right?
What that was, and it's a few places around town, when the development goes in and then they drop the curb for a driveway access, and then when the person builds some years later, they want a different house style, or the driveway that's not where they want the driveway, they'll do a new curb cut to put the driveway in. Rather than cutting the old curb out and filling it in, they just kind of laid concrete along the top of the old one, and now they're starting to peel off. So it may have lasted for 20 years or 15 years, but now they're all coming off, and that's something we're going to have to deal with, and how do we handle that?
Any other questions? Thank you, Vicki. All right, we'll move on to our action items. Action item 7A, approves 2013 semi-annual pay-as-you-go tax increment payments.
We have two contracts right now that are semi-annual payments, and the rest of them are just one annual payment in December. The two semi-annual tax increment financing payments go to Riverview Townhomes, which is the one on Beechnut Court. That's a payment to the developer of $5141.97. And then there's another one that is where Sauk Center Welding is, but that's actually a payment to the bond fund. So taxes that are generated from them go to pay that bond, and that's $24,251.21. And those two pay-as-you-go payments were recommended by the EDA for payment.
Any questions?
How much longer do we have on the Riverview Townhome TIF?
These both will be done in 2014.
Oh, okay.
One more year.
Almost there.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the 2013 pay-as-you-go payments as presented?
So move.
Motion by Warren, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Keith. Any discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. Moving on to action item B, approve 2013 semi-annual abatement payments. Vicki?
The city also has two abatement projects similar to tax increment, except that it only involves the city share of the taxes, where the city has agreed to rebate them their city share of taxes for a period of years in exchange for development, including jobs. The two that we have is the Fairway Pines. They have a semi-annual abatement payment due August 1st, and the amount of that payment is $8809.24. And the second one is Dunham Express out in the industrial park, and they have a semi-annual payment of $2656.41. So this, as I said, rebates them their city share of taxes for a period of time. And the EDA as well has recommended approval of those payments.
Any questions?
Yeah, same question.
Same question.
How much time is left on those? They must be almost over too.
The Fairway Pines is 5 years of full increment, so they have a couple more years left to go. The Dunham Express was a longer contract, could go up to 15 years, but it had a cap on the dollar amount of like $50,000, so whichever we hit.
Okay.
Any other questions? None? Is there a motion to approve the semi-annual abatement payments to Fairway Pines in the amount of $8,809.24 and to Dunham Express in the amount of $2,656.41?
So moved.
Motion by Dave, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Warren. Is there any discussion? Call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. Moving on to 7C, approve ordinance 739, providing for securing vacant buildings. Vicki?
As you recall, at the last council meeting, we had some discussion about securing vacant buildings, in which you actually passed a resolution asking us to do so. And following that meeting, after questions that were brought up, we did some additional research with the League of Minnesota Cities, and they actually have provided me with a sample ordinance that they recommend that the city pass, because it gives the city a little additional guidance. It has all the state statute items that we went under last month with the city attorney, but it also provides us some additional things, what constitutes a vacant building, and it talks a lot about the property rights and the notice, and this would go right into our city code, so there's never a question about the procedure and that we treat everybody the same that come along in these instances. I did send it over to the city attorney for review. He is recommending that we do pass it, especially the part, you know, it has to do with, talks about emergency procedures. If we ever had to go in and emergency secure something, we didn't have time to go to the council, something was imminent and it needed to be secured, it provides guidance for the city staff and protection for the city if we do that, and that would be section 4 of that proposed ordinance. So I guess what we're recommending is to approve ordinance 739, providing for securing vacant buildings. And I certainly can answer any questions about any of the items on there if you have them.
Thank you, Vicki. I think one thing, Vicki, and I know we talked about earlier, but it's to be noted, is that there was some questions about the clarity of what is the definition of a vacant building, and this really spells that out very, very well on, very first page, actually, the vacant building and what that definition is. There's 7 different criteria that it may or may meet to meet a vacant building definition. So I think that certainly supports that, which is the League of Minnesota Cities is very much strongly recommends, especially in the position where we're moving down this road. I think it's appropriate for us to move forward with this ordinance to clarify definitions at the very least, and also give some guidance, and as Vicki noted. So, is there any other comments or questions of staff? None? Is there a motion then to approve ordinance 739, providing for securing vacant buildings?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Motion by Keith. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Warren. Is there any further discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. Thank you. Moving on to approve resolution 2013-50, granting a variance for road right-of-way.
At the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment meeting on July 9th, the board recommended approval of variance from the road right-of-way to allow the construction of a larger accessible front porch on an existing home located at 1221 Park Lane. There's an existing 4x22 covered porch that would be removed and replaced by an 8x20 covered porch. The home, as you can see on the certificate of survey, exists at 27 feet from the road right-of-way, with the porch being 23. The variance would allow an additional 4 feet or a 19 feet setback. Homes constructed on this street was during a time frame where the city did not require surveys, and so we find them at various distances from the right-of-way, sometimes at 32, sometimes at 26. They're a little bit across the board there simply because it was measured and it was not, there was not a certificate of survey required. The one thing that the Planning Commission did say was they felt that the setback, the closeness to the road was somewhat mitigated by the fact that there's open walls on this porch. I did provide with you the staff report that was provided to the Planning Commission so that you can see all the background, and that you do have the copy of the certificate of survey, the elevations of what the home would look like, and also the resolution, which has several findings that they found when they made the recommendation. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try answer those. Otherwise, we're asking for approval of resolution 2013-50, granting a variance from the road right-of-way.
Any questions?
Comment.
Any comments?
We have a number of these come through, and it makes me wonder why we bother with having a setback requirement at all, because we just have a variance for it down the road. It seems at some point we either admit that 30 feet was an arbitrary number that we put up sometime anyway and make a reasonable requirement and just let it go, or stick to it. I mean, have a reason for it, because we have a lot of these. Half the homes in this town probably don't meet a 30-foot setback anyway. And that means anybody else in that neighborhood says, well, I just want to build as far as my neighbor is. So, we all end up that far. And then we end up with a slight extension on the porch. Well, now all the other neighbors get another 4 feet too, don't they? And pretty soon, what's the point of having a setback requirement? If there's a rational requirement for one, then let's make it and stick with it. The home I lived in the cities probably had 8 feet of setback. I told Keith, it's real easy to cut the front yard. But, at what point do you say, how much front yard do you have to have? And not deal with everybody coming in one at a time and getting another 4 feet until they're all out at the street anyway.
Very good point. Vicki, do you?
We do have, and that is one thing that the Planning Commission, the City Council has to always be aware of. If you're constantly granting something, maybe you need to look at your ordinance. It's exactly what you said. We did go back, and we've actually probably given, in the last 5 years, maybe 3 of these. Not a whole lot of them, but it does seem like a lot, and you start looking at that. So you have to find out, what is it that's different about this one that means that they should be granted this? Or is there an error in our ordinance that means that maybe the setback that we have isn't realistic? Something, I guess, that the Planning Commission looks at occasionally and looks and sees if there's something that we're always being asked to grant a variance from. Perhaps we should look at our ordinance. This might be one of them. I can't say that. I mean, that's certainly something the Planning Commission can look at. But in this instance right here, we're looking at a house that's existing when he bought it, and I understand that, and I see how the house got placed the way it was. If he can live with the setback he's got or not, I mean, he's requesting to build it closer, and that's what he took to the Planning Commission, and so that's why we're in front of you tonight.
All right. I think, Dave, those are very good points. And I think what you're saying is, how often are we doing it? And maybe we seem to do get a lot of variances, and I think, some of the variances differ some. So whether it's the setback variance or a side variance or rear, you know what I mean? There's probably several different ones. But I think, if we have done just a handful over 5 years, that's probably not a lot of them. So is that, 30 foot to what it needs to be? To me, I would agree. I mean, I think as long as it isn't something that we're dealing with on a, regular basis, and I think it's something that we have to have some number. But what is that number? And I do believe the last time the Planning Commission updated this particular part of the planning and zoning regulations was, tell me the year, Vicki.
2005 for the setbacks have been in place. But that would be a good thing maybe for the Planning Commission to review, is to let's look at our variance issue and see what they were for. Maybe we need some updates.
Yep.
The setback, it is kind of a gray area, mainly because I think the 30-foot setback is probably for new residential buildings, new developments and stuff like that, where Planning Commission and the council both have stated that, we got different areas of town that it's going to be really hard to do anything with certain lots, and we have to look at that too. And maybe there's other guidelines that the Planning Commission does have to look at, but this is one of them situations with that neighborhood was put in when there was no guidelines, and is it right to deny them the fact, or is it right to?
Yeah, well, I don't have any problem with the variance, but it seems like if you can get a variance pretty much any time, well, there's not much point in having the setback requirement at 30 feet if anybody who wants to is just going to come in and get 25 or 17 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, the 30 is a guideline, not a requirement. And maybe it should be tied to lot size. New developments usually have bigger lots. Mm-hmm. And that type of a development generally has bigger setbacks. That would make sense to me. But around town, we have an awful lot of small lots.
Right.
And I'm sure none of them meet this setback. And you try to put a handicap ramp, and what do you do?
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think, Vicki, from our discussion here, you can maybe take some of this back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to maybe even take a look at this at a future meeting to see, should this be considered different. And I think Warren has a very good point. And our community is unique because there's old part of town and the new part of town. Part of the old part was developed later than part of the old part. You know what I mean? It's really a very unique community. So from that perspective, we are definitely going to have some of these challenges. But I agree with both of the counselors that I think it needs to be looked at to see if we can. Sarah, do you have more to add?
I was just quickly looking at my spreadsheet, and we have one setback variance for this year, 0 in 2012, 0 in 2011, 0 in 2010, 2 in 2009, and 2 in 2008.
Thank you. But I think it's not necessarily maybe the number, it's the
Point
point
is,
of
yeah.
how it's established. So, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, what's the wishes of the council?
I make a motion that we grant the variance.
Okay.
I'll second it.
We got a motion by Keith, seconded by Warren to approve Resolution 2013-50 granting a variance from the road right-of-way setback to Mr. Bick. Okay, any discussion? We'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions? Motion carries, 4 in favor, none against. Moving on, approve ordinance 740 amending definition of setbacks.
Coincidentally,
This follows up with something we just said, so.
you know, the Planning Commission, again, on July 9th, had a public hearing, and the commission voted to recommend the definition of setbacks be amended in the zoning ordinance. Now, the reason that we wanted to do this is to clarify some things in what is or not included in the setback. People are like, is roof overhang, is it not? And we measure to the foundation wall, of course. But the biggest part that we have issues with in the older part of town, again, is that if you look at these older houses that have the concrete steps, you come out the door and you start down the steps. There's no landing or anything there. And these people want to take out these concrete steps, build a stoop or a flat landing area, and then stairs down. And this is common language that we have in our proposal, in that stoops not exceeding 30 square feet, in other words, a 5x6 little landing area, and the steps that go from the ground to the ground, but not over 4 feet wide. We don't even count them in the setback. That way, we're agreeing that that can protrude into the setback to give people safe access. And some of this language is like stoop, and that definition is the building code side of it. So it kind of marries the building code into our zoning ordinance, but it also gives some leeway to those persons that they don't have to then come in and get a variance, et cetera, if they just want to put that front landing on their house to go in and out. So that's really what this does, and it's really all that this does, except for the part about the 3 feet of roof overhang. And sometimes people are trying to get clever and go like 8 feet and have this big overhang, and says, no, 3 feet is okay, but beyond that, you know, then we start measuring, it has to be set back further. So we do have that presented in ordinance form, ordinance 740, amending the definition of setbacks, and the Planning Commission is recommending its approval.
Any questions?
Yeah, I see that we're not counting stoops and steps, it looks like. It seems like we shouldn't count ramps either then, unless by definition they count as a step.
Handicap ramps?
Yeah, like a handicap ramp.
Generally, we wouldn't if it wasn't roofed and covered.
Well, that was the old definition, said roofed and covered. You know, that would have allowed a porch, for that matter, if it didn't have a roof on it, a deck out front.
Right. And
Would
this,
not have counted. That's not, I don't see that in the new definition, so. But I'm just thinking right off the bat, we just had a variance because of a ramp. Well, if it was steps, it wouldn't have counted.
but that was going to be a covered roof porch.
Well, I don't know that it says anything about a roof over the steps from what I'm looking here.
I mean, on our new definition?
I'm looking at your summary, and the new definition says steps. It doesn't say unroofed steps.
No, maybe that's something that needs to be added.
So maybe.
Stoop without a roof.
Maybe it's not
You know?
quite ready.
Yeah, Vicki, I think what we need to do is for you to get some clarity, maybe before we act on this.
Okay.
So if we could table this at this point for some clarity on the definition, both specifically the new definition and what's included. And that way, I think you can bring back something that's ready for us to adopt. General consent of the council to table this at this time?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, do you need any additional description from us for what we're looking for? So when you
I think
go
so.
back-
We'll go back and we'll look at how do we handle ramps, and we'll look at whether that definition with the stoops should be considered. Unroofed stoops are allowed in the setback, but if it's roofed, then it needs to meet the some language like that.
Very good. All
You
right.
know, and I'd be pleased if, in addition, as long as we're changing setback stuff, if we might look into whether there's a different way of handling our setbacks in general, whether we define it based on small lot versus large lot or something.
We do
maybe we
actually.
can address some of the other things.
I think.
We do have a special provision in our ordinance. If you have one of the downtown lots, the
Yep.
old part of town, then the setback for the sides is based on a percentage of the width of the lot. But the street setback has always been consistent.
Right. Well,
So-
maybe that's something that just could be reviewed at the same time.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. All right, we'll move on then to action F, ordinance 741, regulating antique stores in residential districts. Vicki?
This is kind of a follow-up. At the last city council meeting, there was an application for a request for rezoning of some property to allow for antique stores, and there was some conversation and introduction of an idea of making an amendment to the ordinance instead, a text amendment, as if that's the explanation I think that was. After that meeting, then that applicant then reapplied to the city to amend the ordinance. And so the Planning Commission did meet on July 9th. They held a public hearing, and they voted to recommend approval of an ordinance regulating antique retail stores in residential districts. I did do a couple bullet points here, because if you look in the ordinance, there's several performance standards of how it would be allowed, et cetera. The retail antique stores would be allowed in residential districts on community collector streets and minor arterials. So the community collector streets in Sauk Center are Sinclair Lewis Avenue and 12th Street. And the minor arterial is Highway 71. So this is the area that we're talking about. If you're residentially zoned on Sinclair Lewis, 12th Street, I should say, yeah, 12th Street, and then Highway 71, that this ordinance then could apply to you. They did have some off-street parking must be provided, one stall of off-street parking for 500 square feet of retail area. They were limiting the hours of operation from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. They were having no outdoor display on the lawn areas. No exterior alteration of the homes that would be used as an antique store. They had a maximum size of display area, so if you had a porch and a basement and an attic and whatever, and it was all contained within there, they didn't want to have where the houses started growing and becoming bigger and bigger because of the antique store. And they would have one sign allowed with a maximum of 9 square feet, which would be like a 3-by-3 sign that they may be allowed to have. This was, the Planning Commission did recommend approval of Ordinance 741 regulating the antique stores. I think some of the other things in here, if you'll kind of see when they talked about the district regulations and the penalty and where they're allowed, what it kind of did was this ordinance or these performance standards answered or responded to the concerns that the Planning Commission and the council had at the previous meeting when they discussed possible rezoning. So any of those concerns, we drew upon those to create this ordinance. So Planning Commission did recommend to approve 741, providing for the regulation of retail antique stores in residential zoning districts.
Any questions?
Yeah, for clarification, how many people were at the Planning Commission meeting? How many members of the board?
3.
And how many voted yes?
2.
So it was not a unanimous decision either.
It was not unanimous.
I am concerned. I mean, we weren't expressing any interest in this before, and I don't understand why an antique retail outlet is somehow unique to any other retail outlet, that it becomes allowed. And I'm concerned that, you know, our residential areas being opened up to retail development. You know, what is it about an antique store that somehow is different from some other little boutique? And I know in my experience, antique stores have a lot more in them than antiques, collectibles, crafts.
And they do have a definition of what an antique is in there. And so, you know, perhaps that answers your question. You know, it's not set up to be craft stores or art galleries or anything like that.
An old collectible.
Vicki, to add to that, just a couple questions for clarity. Obviously, as we talked, and certainly I believe that the collector streets are unique to the community. I've said that for many years, and they continue to expand upon what's happening within our community. So I think that's always taken into consideration when we look at what's happening within the collector street or the high traffic areas. That being said, I think there's also a couple more thoughts. You know, it sounds to me like the planning and zoning did have this public hearing, I mean, everybody certainly knew when their planning and zoning meetings were, so they had, you know, it was a regular scheduled meeting, yes. The other thought is was this planning public hearing mailed out to all of the residents that this impacted?
No, in order to, we'd have to mail the whole city or mail all of 12th Street, all of Sinclair, all of Highway 71. An ordinance amendment like this is something that you publish, but not necessarily mail. It's not specific to any specific residence, so there's not a 350-foot residence circumference to mail.
Okay.
I really don't have any questions, but, you know, I'm one of them, I wasn't able to make the planning commission meeting. And I apologize for that, because I really wish I would have been there, because we all know the background history of this whole thing. And to me, changing the text of something, of an ordinance for one item is sidestepping what our zoning process is. We've had 2 public hearings, well, not 2 public hearings, but a public hearing at planning and zoning, and we had public comment at a council meeting with neighborhood that says they don't want it. And whether it's a collector street or not, I feel if we pass this, what we're doing is, you know, personally, I have a real problem with government taking care of people. You know, they got to take care of things on their own. There's plenty of places to go. We shouldn't have to bend over backwards or change our things to help out. Personal comment, but I actually think we're sidestepping everything that Sauk Center's ever been for just to help someone out, you know. Not that we shouldn't, but I think we're overstepping or bending over way too far.
I think, do you have any thoughts, Keith?
No.
No? Okay. I certainly think that you know, this has come up more than once, obviously. We've addressed this on several different occasions, and we continue to look at this. However, when an applicant, and it doesn't matter who it is, I don't care if it's Joe Schmo or anybody, they want to come in here and make a request to the council. They have that right, and you have to look at all of the facts, and you have to take into consideration not who, but what.
Right.
And so what we're doing here tonight, what I'm looking at this is, it doesn't matter to me who it is, but it's what it's about. And it's about, to me, it's about whether or not do you want to put an antique store or allow an antique store with some very specific regulations in a collector street area. That's what it's about. Doesn't matter to me who it is. So I'm just looking at this and focused on the ordinance entirely within itself. So, I mean, that's the way I'm making my decision on whether or not we should move this forward. But just so we're clear, we all need to remember that it's not about who, but about what, and for clarity for that.
The only thing is, and I agree with you, that's how it should be handled. The only thing is what's stopping any other type of business to come in and ask us to change the text so they can be in a residential area. And then we totally destroy our residential area just because it's a collector street. That's the part I don't want to set a precedence on, to open the can of worms for everybody that says, I have a little business.
Yep.
Change your text and make it right for me, no matter what it is.
And so what we have is a difference of opinions on what should be allowed on collector streets and what shouldn't, right? And I think we all have some different opinions in regards to that. So your point's very well taken, Warren, and I'm not arguing that point. I just think we all have a little different opinion on how is our community, my opinion is our community has been expanding and growing from our downtown. And I understand that the downtown buildings are open. There's a lot of places to go with antique stores. We got a lot of open stores downtown, and that's obviously I would love to see it all down there. But when I drive up and down Sinclair Lewis and 12th Street, they're not the same as what they were even 5 years or 10 years or 25 years ago. They're changing. So, I mean, I think you have to keep that into consideration. Do we not want them to? That's, you know, every council, everybody has a little different opinion on that. But again, I think it's very good discussion. And again, I think we're talking about a particular unique ordinance here. And with that, I guess if there's no more discussion or questions of staff, I'll turn it to the council for a vote, and we can decide on where we go from there.
I guess I'd make a motion that we not approve the ordinance 741 regulating antique stores.
Okay, a motion by Keith,
I'll second it.
and I guess the motion, so I clarify, the motion to deny ordinance 741 regulating antique stores in residential areas. Motion by Keith, seconded by Warren. No, this is not open. Any discussion with the council? Call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. 3 in favor, 1 against. Okay. Moving on, action item G, receive report and direct staff to secure buildings.
At the City Council meeting on July 19th, the council directed that owners of 6 properties be given notice to secure their buildings. All no owners were notified via first-class mail and certified mail. Chief Fredericks has since conducted a second inspection for a status update. You will see that we've had contact with 4 of the owners. There's been no contact with 1 owner, but that is secured. That would be 625 Getty. And there's been no contact with 200 North Ash Street, and the house remains open. So the other houses, like I said, 625 Getty Street, the house is secure. 524 Hickman Drive, the property has been sold and we'll be working with the new owners. 518 Elm Street South, the property has been sold and we're working with the new owners. 331 Maple Street South, they have boarded up the windows. There's still some stuff in the garage. The garage is still open, but I have been in contact with that owner. And 332 Birch Street North, the front door has been secure, and I have been in contact with that owner who states the house is being removed. So we really only have, as far as receiving the report and directing that staff secure the vacant building, is that I'm requesting a direction that staff be advised to secure the building at 200 North Ash Street. So that is the action here. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up is I know that this was just kind of the first step, and then we have to start looking at, you know, not only these 6 buildings, but there was a few other ones that we were discussing with the city attorney. Are we ready to take that step to begin the process to have some of these homes removed? Is this something you want to wait till we get through the budget cycle? I mean, it's a drawn-out process. It's going to take a year, so I don't know, do we want to get him working on that or however? But first, we'll need the action on securing this vacant building. And whether you want to have a little discussion on taking it to the next level, if we want to put that on another agenda or out to a committee, that would be fine. I just don't want to drop that part of it.
All right. Any questions? I think, Vicki, we'll take the second part of your question after we have the action here, if you don't mind. That, in regards to this request, is there a motion to direct staff to secure the building at 200 North Ash Street?
So moved.
Motion by Dave.
Second.
Second by Warren. Any discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. In regards to Vicki's question about whether or not we need to move this forward to direct city attorney to begin the condemnation process, I think we kind of have started some of the process already, to be honest with you guys. That being said, of the work and the time that we put into it up to this point, it has already granted dividends from the way I look at it from the city. 2 properties are looking at being sold or have been sold, and others are making an attempt to do some things. But I think the process based on Tom's outline, we know is a long process, and I would recommend that we would move forward and continue that process. And by doing so, these certainly not just these remaining 6 on here, but the other ones that we've been having discussions about will take us serious, that this is something we are not going to just talk about and like we have for many years and not address. So my recommendation to the council is that we would move this forward and continue with that process.
And I think we've all pretty much decided that we're going to finish this process off,
So with general consent of this council, we will continue on. Tom will move forward with the process of condemnation for those remaining properties.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Vicki. All right, we will move on to action item H, approve partial payment voucher number 7, R.L. Larson.
The payment approval 7 has been submitted for payment by R.L. Larson. It's for work completed on the 4th and 5th and Getty and Oak and that project, the 2012 and 13 stormwater and street project. The payment request is for $10,686.79. Work completed to date, $2,140,520.18, of which payments will have been made, including this payment of $2,033,494.17. So we're getting close to the end. So we're requesting to approve the payment voucher number 7 in the amount of $10,686.79.
Any questions? That outlines it pretty well. Is there a motion to approve the payment voucher number 7 in the amount of $10,686.79?
So moved.
Motion by Dave, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Warren. Any discussion? Paul, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is there any of this being held back for a period of time?
Yes.
5%.
We do,
5%?
yeah.
We have a retainage,
I
yep.
can't remember what the,
Yep.
I think it's 5%.
It's 5%, and to this point, it's $107.26.
okay,
Okay?
thanks.
Any other questions? I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, against.
Just real quick regarding that, I thought it was on here. There is a retainage on here. 107,000 and change is on the list.
Yep.
Okay.
Moving on to I, approve advancement for EMTs. Vicki?
We have 2 EMTs that have been with the city for 5 years, and they're recommended for advancement. The ambulance pay scale has the pay ranges for 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, and over 15 years. And this is for their run time, when they're out on a call. The rate for the 5 to 10-year range is $13.52 per run hour. The 2 EMTs eligible for advancement are Aaron Feltman and Mark Roberg, both effective August 6, 2013. Both EMTs remain active on the crew. They meet the patient contact criteria, and the advancement is recommended by Ambulance Director Kathy Strufert. You will see that she does have 2 letters in your packet recommending the advancement. So the action requested is to approve advancement of Aaron Feltman and Mark Roberg to step EMT B2 at $13.52 per hour, effective August 6, 2013.
Any questions? It appears both Mark and Aaron have met the criteria requirement to move forward with this next step advancement. So my recommendation is that we approve advancement of Aaron Feltman and Mark Roberg to step EMT B2 at $13.52 per hour, effective August 6, 2013.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion by Warren, second by Keith.
Sure.
Any discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor. Against. Moving on to J, approve the scope of services contract with Northland Strategies.
The first and largest TIF district of the city is set to wind down in 2014. In preparation for the decertification, the EDA is recommended that the city contract with Northland Strategies, also Northland Securities, to assist with planning and decertification, and also to identify potential options for use of the remaining funds under their pooling option. And pooling simply is in the older districts. Once a district is set to decertify, there's some options for you to use the remaining funds that are in there on other economic development projects. The other option then, of course, is to return that money to the county, and it gets divvied up back to the original county-state school taxing districts. The funds currently exist within the TIF district. They're available for administrative use to cover these expenses. The contract says not to exceed $3,500. And so we're recommending, and the EDA is recommending, to approve the scope of services contract with Northland Strategies.
Any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the scope of services contract with Northland Strategies?
So moved.
Motion by Dave, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Keith. Any questions? Call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. Moving on to unfinished business this evening. We have 3 things on our report. Vicki, if you want to go ahead on the project report in the 2012
Just to have a
storm?
very brief update on the project report out here for the storm white. We're kind of waiting for the concrete guys to, again, all the curb is done. We have about 2.5 days of sidewalk and ped ramps, et cetera, to go in. And then we've been repairing the irrigation between the buildings out here where we went between the buildings, and that is set to go and mostly up and running, except for the part where the sidewalk is, because they need to have those final elevations. A couple things they want to do is get those ped ramps on Main Street and Fifth Street done before this weekend, before we have a lot of people walking, et cetera. So that is their goal, to get that done. And then they'll be going paving after that. We don't have a commitment on the paving date because we can't do that until we have the concrete work done. So, but we are still looking for the end of July to get some paving in the ground in the end of July, or either that or the first part of August. So we still are well ahead of our August 25th date that they're supposed to be done, but we were making such good progress and we're so far ahead that now when we have these delays with the concrete guys and the dirt guys and everything, that it makes it seem like it's dragging out. But they are moving forward, and hopefully we'll get the concrete done and we'll get the paving in there. So.
Any questions, comments?
I know with the lighting, that's all been buried in the pedestals or for the posts and everything are in, but I had one resident concerned about if there was going to be enough light along that street, considering there's a lot less poles.
We took out 5 poles, and there are actually 5 going back in.
Okay.
So they're different poles. We took out the Cobra heads, but we're putting back in the residential style lights that we have out in the developments. And the ones by the intersections will use the higher wattage bulbs, and the ones that are in the street probably have the lower wattage. But the lighting will be similar to, out in the residential districts that we have, but we do have 5 going back in.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Vicki. Update on flower watering. You
We do
want to
have
give
that.
that, or Dave want to?
Well, Dave is going to give this
All
report.
right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Update, we haven't killed them yet, so.
That's good.
About the best I can say. I mean, they're looking good, I think. It's worked out pretty well with the equipment that we have, the intent. So, I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's just something we do every day, and if it rains, of course, a half inch or better, then we probably don't go out and water them that day, but 26 times we've watered them since we hung them up. Is that right? Right before Memorial Day, yeah.
So you're saying that it's actually been working fairly well. Obviously, it takes staff time, and it takes the equipment to be prepared and do those things, but
Yep.
you're doing it, and you're still getting your other work done, and I guess that's kind of what I'm hearing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's Dennis, our summer help there, he has done it 90% of the time, and a few days he hasn't been there, or he needed help with the painting, so then I did it, so I knew just what it was all about and how well that machine really worked, and so yeah, it's working out.
Okay. Any questions? No? All right, thank you. Then we'll go right into the update on the Gator usage, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I had Mickey type up a sheet there, and I think you guys all got one of those.
Yep.
And it just goes through the items that we've used it for so far this year, how long it took, and what we would have used had we not had it.
So in a sense, since you've had that machine, you've used it 44 hours. it
Yes.
appears. How many hours was on the, well, beginning hours was 134, and the fire department had that machine for how many hours? Or how many years? Excuse me?
9.
9 years. And we used it for 134 hours, and you used it in 4 weeks? How many weeks have you had it? 8,
Well, first used date was the end of April.
right?
10 weeks.
So 10 weeks you've used it 44 hours.
Yes.
4 hours a week,
That's right.
watering flowers.
Well, I think it's used for a lot
Half
of
of it
things.
watering flowers,
Right.
yeah.
Right, yeah, there was 20 hours, 20.8 hours were
Yep.
other items.
Worn
that
out to give up now.
Nobody would want it, would they?
So I think, one of the things that we had wanted you to, wanted to do was to, for sure, for us to understand how much usage was it going to be did we have a need for it? That's really what it came down to, right, when we had this initial discussion. Do we have a need for the gator, or should we sell it? I think that's really what it was all about. And it appears we do everything, from burn to brush, tree inspections, pick up trash, turn water on and off in campgrounds, work on Sinclair Lewis campground, water repairs, obviously the water festival, sprinkler work, fertilization type of things, certainly watering the flowers, it works well. Your comments is the gator's handy for so many jobs. We'd use it more for tree inspecting, weed whipping, blowing out water lines, and maintenance on restrooms and playground. The gator is much faster than the GT20 garden tractor for watering flowers. Of course, the trailer was another part of that, and when we bought the new fire apparatus with the new trailer, or the Ranger, I'll say, the discussion at that time was that we would sell the gator and we would sell the trailer with hopefully enough proceeds to pay for the new trailer for the Ranger. That was what the discussions was. So, and I believe that was approximately $4,500. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it was in that. $4,675. Okay, thank you. All right, so we're close. So that being said, that was our discussion. Has you folks and the fire department or John had discussions about the value and doing an intercompany transfer of funds to offset that, or where are we at in that part of this discussion?
Yes, and in fact, I just brought it up again with him today, and that's all he is looking for, is that they would get the cost of that new trailer out of the old equipment from us.
Okay.
And if it would be so, we would split it evenly between the street and park departments out of those budgets.
The trailer obviously gets used a lot, and I think we all had talked about that trailer and said that trailer is perfect for that. The trailer really wasn't the issue, and so the gator is what we were talking about. We don't have no action this evening, and I think we won't. I just wanted to bring this up for discussion so that the staff has some direction for a future council meeting about how we want to see this being handled. We can continue on throughout the year with the gator. We feel that the gator is still more clarification needs to come back to the council about whether or not it's used down there and whether it's used enough. I guess from what I'm seeing in the short time it's been there, it seems to be used a lot, and to me it's saving time and probably money. We would have used fire trucks and pickups and different things to do a lot of the things that the gator's doing. So I think if the council would agree, or if we wanted to have some type of action, that we would ask staff to direct an action item at a future meeting to come back to do an intercity transfer, inter-fund transfer. We would, I'd be looking for some type of direction in this council.
Yeah, that seems appropriate. I mean, I just look at 4 hours of fire truck time and think, well, that has to be several $100s right there just on the one option. One thing.
So with that, any other comments? I know there's none. Did you have something, Keith? Any thoughts?
No, I guess I kind of agree with Dave too. And then the one thing about that, if they were using a fire truck and an actual fire did develop somewhere else, it's not like you could shut down this fire to respond to that one.
Right.
That quick. So I think I'm glad it's a great fit, and I think we should try to figure something out to show the firemen that we don't want to leave them in the lurch either. So.
Right.
They just wanted to sell it anyway.
They just wanted to make sure that the funds were going to hit their inter-fund accounts. So with that, if it's the general consent of the council, Warren, I don't know how you feel?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. General consent of the council staff to put together an action item at our next council meeting to transfer those two items to the street and park department based on their agreement of the inter-fund transfer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Moving on, new business. 9A, set budget workshop meeting. Okay.
All the department heads have been giving their budget worksheets for their budget proposals for 2014. That'll be submitted to the Finance Committee and then the City Council in August for consideration. The Council, your timeline to adopt the preliminary levy is September 4th, so it's not that far away. The council generally meets in a special meeting to consider the preliminary budget in mid-August. We could meet August 14th, these are Wednesdays at 5, prior to the second meeting in August on the 21st at 5. So we can maybe make either one of them work. The one thing we have to do is get everything back from the department heads, get it put together, get it to finance committee, get the part on the capital projects to operations committee. So we have some other meetings to get in there. So pushing it to the 14th might be a push. But if we meet in August prior to the next council meeting, I don't know how much time you feel you'll need to go through it. If starting like at 5 or something would be enough time.
I think.
So, we could do either one or end up starting one night and continuing another time. I mean, I'm open to those suggestions.
I don't know what was done last year. I mean, I wasn't here at that time, but I think in the years prior to that, we'd have a special meeting. We didn't do it prior to a council meeting, and I think I would like us to do it on a off Wednesday that's not a regular scheduled meeting, so that we're not rushed, and that we can take the time that's necessary to spend on the budget. So my recommendation would be whatever week, if it is in August, if it's not the 14th, because we have a meeting on the 21st. I don't know about the 28th, but whatever day in August that you're prepared on a Wednesday, that's not a council.
Well, we
meeting.
can go for August 14th. That's the second, that's between the
Right.
first and the third council meeting.
But will you have it, will you be ready? I mean, you mentioned that's,
Well, the department heads are all supposed to have it back to me by the 6th, so then I can turn it around and get it out to the committees that week.
okay.
So, but I do need to get it to the council then probably the Friday before, so that puts it all within that 1 week. I think we can do it, but, it'll be a challenge, put it that way.
All right.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather see it on the 14th, and if that's such a burden that, on the 14th it's getting late, we can overflow to, the next Wednesday and finish things up.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I was thinking otherwise the 28th,
Or the 28th, yeah.
but then that pushes us right to
That pushes you
And
right
we're
up
just
to
on
the
the
end.
limit.
adoption, so
Yep.
we can't probably do that. All right, we'll shoot for the 14th, Vicki. Okay, moving on to B, request for property acquisition. Vicki?
We have a property owner at the end of 2nd Street South, which is on the east side, not on the west side, but on the east side of 2nd Street South, and they are landlocked. They have property, and I did give you a map of which shows their property behind another house, and they want to get city water and sewer. They currently do not have water and sewer, and the city owns the property adjacent. It's the property where we take the snow in the winter at the end of 2nd Street, and they're requesting to purchase or get an easement across a strip of property alongside of theirs down to the public road for 2 reasons. One, so they have legal access for financing purposes, and then also so they can get city water and city sewer. And we did have that property line marked, so there are pink stakes out there so you can see how close that property line is to those houses. And I think this is probably something we want to send to a committee to review it and to come back with a recommendation on what's the best option for this person and see how we can move forward. And one time before, when we had a request for the sale of city property, we sent it to the policy committee. So I don't know if you want to do that again, send it to the policy committee or planning and policy, I guess it's called, and we could come back with a recommendation.
I think if that would be good to send it to the Policy and Planning Committee, let them do the background and come back with a recommendation, and we'll have a full council discussion at that time.
Right.
General consent to send it to the Policy and Planning Committee?
Yeah.
Yes? All right, Vicki, general consent. Okay, we'll move on to C, proposed purchase of public works pickup.
Throughout this whole year, we've been rotating vehicles through with purchase of a plow truck and a new 1-ton, and we sold the chipper truck, and we sold an old dump truck, and we sold the parts runner truck. So we've kind of purchased some and sold some, rotated out some back from the 80s. And then once we did the sale of the last 3 vehicles, after commission, we had $10,042 left. And at the time we sold them, there was talk about we would eventually be coming with, it wasn't a secret, they'd be eventually wanting to replace the parts runner truck. And so they provided me, or I checked with the state min bid site, and these are in the last month, 4 vehicles that have sold, the DNR or state trucks, like 2010 Ford with 46,000 miles for $13,000, down to a 2008 with 62,000 miles for $8,450. And so I think what we'd like to do is to have the Operations Committee review this to see if they think we should purchase a truck now, if we should roll this into the next year and think about purchasing something with a little higher value next year. I think we're probably all in agreement we don't want to buy something old with 100,000 miles on it because we want something, we typically keep a vehicle for like 20 years, so we need something that's going to last. So just kind of a little bit of a background there. But my recommendation is we send that to Operations Committee, and because they're the ones that have talked about the buying and the selling of the vehicles, and then they can come back with a recommendation.
That's fine. General consent of the council, we'll move that to the Operations Committee for their review and recommendation back to the council. Okay? All right, we'll move right into the D, update on 5-year capital improvement plan.
This I alluded to when we were setting the budget meeting, but the 5-year capital improvement plan, after it comes back from the department heads, then typically it would go to the Operations Committee for review, and then those numbers get put into the budget. So this is just kind of another one of those general consent deals. The council knows that they'll be working on the 5-year CIP plan as soon as it gets available from the department heads. So I guess if you formally want to, by consent, send review to them, but at least the rest of you know that that's what they'll be working on.
I think it's, if I could just make one comment, in regards to the capital improvement plan, is if this council or anybody that's maybe not on the Operations Committee feels there's something specific in their mind that needs to be considered for this capital improvement plan based on maybe what some they've heard from the community or some project that they think is extremely needs some consideration or needs to be looked at closely, I would recommend to get that to staff so that they know and they can continue to at least to look at that rather than saying it at the council meeting when we're ready to adopt, because that's sometimes that happens. So very good. So general consent, we'll send this review of the 5-year CIP to Operations Committee when it's available. Yes. All right. Very good. Thank you. Moving on to E, board member appointments. Ricky.
And this is just something that I brought up that I think needs to be discussed and maybe reviewed, and that we just had several people on the council have had changes in their time commitments, and it makes it more and more difficult to attend meetings. I don't know if this is an option for somebody to swap boards, if we need to do something about meeting times or what we really need to do about that. But, and I think maybe the policy committee should review that and how we set those boards up, and perhaps talk to each of the board members and see, you know, is there something they'd rather serve on? Are they open to something else? Or is there some other reason why they can't attend the meetings? I don't know. But I think we've had quite a few meetings in the last year where we haven't had a full board meeting. And so it makes it more difficult. You know, you end up with a couple people missing or even one person missing. And it just makes it more difficult to conduct business. So that was me putting this on here, just requesting that the city council have a conversation about it.
I think the Operations Committee has had 100% participation.
Yeah.
And Vicki, I think if I can just add a couple things. I know, you know, what I think we need to really do is let's look at each one of our availability. You know, we all, like you said, some of us, whether employment's changed or where the timing doesn't work or the date that the meeting's on or the time, those are all things that we can work around. It's just letting staff know if it's something, one, it's going to work for your schedule just based on any changes you may have, or two, is it something that maybe you were put on and now you just not interested in being on it. There might be things that you really just doesn't strike you as something that you feel that you're able to, you know, give any input to, and you just want to do something different. Because I think we need to be open to that option as well. And so if we need to move people around to a different committee because it's not just their time or not just their availability, but because they just don't have no interest in serving on that committee. I mean, we're looking again at the end of the year about appointments, and I hope this year what we'll find is a lot of people will be much more, you know, upfront about, well, you know what, I really would like to serve on that one, or I really don't have interest in that, so I'm not interested in serving on that one, so please don't appoint me to it. Because ultimately I do the appointments when you guys certainly approve those, but I can't do it unless I get a lot of feedback and good feedback that says, yeah, I'm really interested, or if you're not, tell me you're not, because that's what, you know, I can't read your minds. And so I just want to make sure that if there's things that's changed, if there's things that you're on that you're not, I mean, people change, works change, I get all that. We just need to make sure that the council is represented when we have these meetings, because it's not really fair to the balance of the boards if we're not being able to attend them, or if we're missing them on a consistent basis. Now, we're all going to miss one from time to time. That's just part of our lives. But, you know, there's just, we don't want to do it consistently, and I think that's happening a little bit just based on different circumstances. So I ask you to get your feedback back to Vicki, and she will be able to put together some options for the council and certainly be able to get the input compiled for us to look at. So that being said, is the general consent that this item got sent to the Policy and Planning Committee for their review, or do we just want to bring feedback to Vicki and see what's...
I'm not sure that the Policy and Planning Committee is going to be helpful there. It's kind of like, you know, if you can't make meetings, you know, and I know Warren has a job change, and things have changed. If the meeting can be moved, great. If for some reason that doesn't work, then I think we just have to be honest about it and say, well, if I can't make a meeting anymore, you know, things change.
Right.
You know, I'm available during the day if something happens, and I'm not anymore.
There might be a different committee that they're...
Yeah, there's other boards and
right.
committees around.
Exactly.
So I don't know that policy and planning is going to solve that problem, I think. It's just something that we just have to sort out. And if it means some reassignments.
Yeah. So I think, and I agree with you, Dave, I have no problems, the council just addressing it. And what I would like to do is Vicki, if you could possibly send out a letter to the council members, one, certainly reminding them of the committees that they're on and the dates that they are, and then ask them to return to you whether or not they're interested in continuing to serve, and if not, what other committees they may or may not be available to be on.
Okay.
Okay? You will compile that, and we'll work through that as a full council at a future
That's
meeting.
fine.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Moving on then to temporary data entry personnel, police department.
Due to a pending temporary vacancy in the police department, Chief Fredericks is seeking approval to hire a temporary data entry person to maintain the police data during the absence. And this is something that has to be done like regularly. It can't wait. It can't be piled up because it's very time sensitive. And he's got a couple options that we've been discussing, and so we're requesting just to have the personnel committee look over that and see what option and how we'd fit it in the budget, et cetera. And so that's kind of our request at this time.
So the general consent of the council, the personnel committee will address the temporary data entry personnel request.
Send away.
Send away, all right. Personnel committee will get that one as well. All right, I think that is the end of our new business. Staff, we had a lot of general consent there. Did you get everything? That's kind of uncommon for what we do. So. All right, got that, Nikki? All right, very good. We'll move on then to the consent agenda. Council to consider the following consent agenda items: the schedule of paids for unpaid claims of $235,196.81, paid claims of $58,119.10, for a total of $293,315.91. We have some June checks. Check numbers 1900E through 1924E, and also 03400 through 034-116, as well as some payroll ACHs, for a total of $1,211,758.38. We also had received a contribution from the men's card playing group for $174.40 to be used for the senior center. Again, I thank them. That's a regular contribution that we are very grateful for. We also have a resolution, and that is in the form of a resolution 213-51. We also have a resolution 213-52 approving an off-site gambling permit for the Sauk Center American Legion, Post 67. This permit would allow for a raffle for the annual rubber ducky race to be held on July 21st at the Conservation Park. And also we have a request from Bill Berg and Jim Winters representing the American Legion Post 67, submitting a temporary extension of our premise permit for an all-school reunion in their north parking lot on Friday, August 16th and Saturday, August 17th, 2013 for the all-school reunion. Okay, is there any questions in regard to the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Dave, seconded by Keith. Any questions, discussion? I'll call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 4 in favor, none against. Informational items. We just had two items in your packet this evening for information. One is that the state demographer estimates our population effective April 1st, 2012 as 4,344, so we were 4,317, so we went up. And also you have the safety committee minutes attached for your information. Staff, do you have anything else for information?
No.
Seeing none and nothing else on our agenda, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Dave and seconded by Keith. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.